Hey, what's going on guys? It's Tom Mason here, back with another video, and today we're talking about the Nikon Z6 with firmware 3 for wildlife and nature photography. So let's get into it. Hey, what's going on guys? My name's Tom Mason. I'm a professional wildlife and nature photographer from the UK, and on my channel I take you behind the scenes, show you tips and tricks for shooting, as well as talking about the technology and camera gear that I use for making my images out in the field. Today we're talking about the Nikon Z6 that loads of people have asked me about over the last couple of months. So the Nikon Z6, I picked this camera up about a year ago, and originally it was just for video work. That's why I bought the camera. I wanted a camera that gave me video autofocus, that had a great 4K sensor readout, that was a mirrorless camera so I could use the viewfinder for framing when I'm in harsh light, anything like that. But also the Z6 had the benefit of being able to output to the Atomos Ninja 5 for raw video. Is something that I wanted to update to in the future, that I have done now. So you know, it's a fully spec'd video camera that is what I wanted, and of course the ability to use the FTZ to mount on all my Nikon lenses, so I didn't have to carry two full systems when I was out in the field. So when I purchased the Z6, for the first couple of months I didn't really shoot that many stills images with it. As I said, it was for video. I took it over to Botswana with me, and I shot all the behind the scenes videos that I've had on this channel with this camera. Had my mic on the top, ND on the front, and I pretty much used it in the same settings every day to shoot my behind the scenes videos, and it was great. I did take a few pictures on those trips, but largely I kind of stuck to my Nikon D850 and the D5 that I borrowed for the trip, to make the most of the opportunities. You know, as a professional photographer, when you go on location, you go somewhere for the first time, you can't risk your kind of career and getting those pictures with a brand new bit of technology. You've got to go with the kind of, you know, the staple, your trusty cameras that you're used to, and that's why I'm picked and used the D850 to make most of my images. And on that trip, you know, I had great opportunity to shoot so many pictures, and I'm so glad that I used those cameras. Early on, the Z6, in terms of the way it focused for stills photography, was a bit of a change from the way that my D850 and the D5 and all the other Nikon DSLRs work. Instead of just being able to leave it in continuous single point AFC, and set it so that my AF on button would trigger the autofocus and would lock in almost every situation, you have to change the mode. So you had to switch between a group and a single point depending how you were shooting, and that can be a bit frustrating if you're not really comfortable with the buttons and how you're going to use it in the field. So you know, it took a little while to get used to. However, now that we've got firmware 3 updated on the Z6, the camera works completely differently. The fact is that autofocus works great across the board, and in autofocus continuous, even in single point, I can track and maintain focus on my subjects, whether they're flying, moving, running around. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It locks on just like my DSLRs. And that is exactly what I wanted. And that's why firmware 3 is such a major bonus for the Z6 and the Z7 as well. And that's why I'm really, really happy with it. So in firmware 3, what did we get? Well, we got updates to the autofocus, as I was talking about. We also got the benefit of animal eye detection. That's really quite funky. But largely it was just an all-round improvement across the camera. The animal eye detect, I know that people were kind of intrigued that would I use it and stuff like that. Not really. You know, I tried it out with a friend's dogs whilst I was over in Ireland, and it works great. You know, it just tracks that eye really well. But for me, I like to pick my autofocus point, my composition, everything like that. So largely, it's something that I would probably not use that much. You know, maybe in the future I might try it a bit more, but really for me, I just wanted continuous single point autofocus that would track in any situation, and we got that. And that's absolutely major. Now, to get the best out of your Z6 in terms of that autofocus, there are a couple of settings that you're going to want to change. Firstly, you're going to go in, and to make it really function like a DSLR, you can go to the menu and you're going to drop down to the custom settings menu, shooting as a display, and then D8, that is apply settings to live view. Now what this does is it kind of makes it more like the image that you get in an optical viewfinder. So basically it's just using the camera's lens wide open to let the light in to then detect on the sensor and show you what you're seeing. You can see your autofocus point and you can also see the metering in terms of how over or underexposed you are. But what it doesn't do is apply your shutter speed or your aperture to it, so you don't see the final image. You see what you would see with a DSLR. And for me, that's absolutely fine because I've worked with them for many years. But what it does do, of course, is it reduces the processing power needed by the camera to drive those functions, and it can push all of that to autofocus that really speeds it up. Now, secondly, the thing that you want to make sure you've got disabled is low light autofocus. It might sound that it's a really beneficial thing to have on, but unless you're in low light, having the low light autofocus turned on reduces the effectiveness and speed of the autofocus in continuous, is what I found anyway. Other than that, the final thing you're going to want to do with your autofocus setup is go into your custom control settings and then make sure that your FN1 button is enabled to allow you to press it in and change that rear dial to swap between single point and group mode. Single point is where I am for 99% of the time, because now that we've got the updates with Firmware 3, it tracks, it follows, it just gets everything how I want it to, and that's what I need most of the time. But if I'm doing a day where I'm photographing a lot of birds in flight, you know, say I was on a seabird island or something like that, where I'm consistently pushing to do bird in flight work, then moving over to that group mode is definitely a benefit. If you're one of those people who finds it hard to keep the box directly over the bird as you're tracking it, moving to the group mode, learning to just switch that over will definitely increase your hit rate and is certainly worth having set up. One thing I'd love to see from Nikon is the ability to change that joystick to the same way that my D850, my D500 used to, so that you could press the joystick down and it would swap the mode to use it as an AF on button, but apply that group mode. That'd be a great update if we could see that in a firmware, but sadly we don't have that just yet. But you know, with those set in, it works just great. Now, in terms of the autofocus in its actual practicality, it works just as I was expected to, be it with the native S-mount lenses like the 24-70 I've got here, or through the FTZ adapter. The focus just nails it every single time. 302.8 with a 1.4 teleconverter, you know, using a teleconverter often slows focus down. I'm not really seeing any problems. In my recent video where I was photographing the hares, that was all shot with the 1.4 teleconverter, the FTZ on the Z6, and the focus was great, perfect every single time. And it's such a benefit, especially for me who does hybrid shooting, to be able to focus, get my stills, and then switch that button, just bang, and shoot some video without any problems whatsoever. The only thing about the autofocus in video that can, I don't know, be a sticking point is the fact that if you're using the FTZ with some of the older Nikon lenses that have just, they're not the most up-to-date motors, you will get a little bit of chattering when it kind of finds focus and something's moving a little bit. But really that's the lens problem rather than the camera. And when we get the new lenses like the 200-600, that's going to be really exciting, the 100-400 that I'm looking forward to, I'm really hopeful that we're going to see absolutely beautiful, smooth video autofocus. And man, I can't wait to get hold of some of them. That's going to be great. But you know, as an all-encompassing autofocus system in this camera, is it good enough for wildlife photography on the daily? And yes, more than enough. You know, when it first came out, I think it was a bit sluggish. It was a little bit slow. But now with the Firmware 3, it locks on, it tracks, it gets that focus when you want it to, and I've had basically no problems. And because of that, I'm starting to use the Z6 all the time for my photography. The D850 has sat on the shelf more than it has ever sat on the shelf because I'm really just enjoying this camera. Some of the subjects I've been working with over the last couple of months before we were locked down were kind of stuff with low light, and so the sensor on this with that 24 megapixels, the larger pixel sizes means the ISO performance is better than my D850. It works really, really nicely and I'm very much enjoying it. And of course, because it's small, lightweight, if I'm traveling somewhere, I throw it straight in the bag. Just to prove how much I really like it, I don't actually have my Nikon D500 anymore. I sold that because between the Nikon D850 and the Z6, it's a more than capable professional photography bag to get everything I want done. And because the Z6 offers me those advanced video features, I've got far more capability at my fingertips with those two cameras than I did or found I had with the D500 as well. And that is why I switched. An additional purchase that shows how much I like this camera is the Z50 that you're watching me on. because when I've recorded my videos for YouTube, I was always using this for it over the last year. But now, as I want to have this in my hand for doing stills and video shooting of the subjects that I'm looking at, whilst also recording myself, I needed a separate camera, so I picked up a Z50 that I'm actually really liking, and I'll probably talk about in the future as well. But yeah, another thing that I really like about the Z6 that I didn't really think about at the time when I purchased it is the fact that because the live view in the viewfinder is the same as what you get on the screen, it really increases the way that you can shoot. On the D850, if I used live view to get a low angle shot, I really can't use continuous autofocus. It is just crap. It just doesn't work. Whereas on the Z6, because what I'm seeing on the the screen on the back is the same as the viewfinder, I can use that autofocus continuous. I can track subjects super low to the ground and get new angles without putting myself in discomfort. You don't have to crick your neck, get really low, anything like that. You just look at the screen and get a totally different shot. Super handy. Something that I didn't even think about, but absolutely love. I'm sure I'll use for a long time to come. So yeah, that's a great little advantage there for the Z6. In terms of the camera, in terms of what improvements could be made, really they're not on the autofocus at the moment. Yes, it could be improved, it could be sharpened up, it could be faster, but I could say that about my D850 as well. Yeah, that would be great to see. But one thing that I would like is the viewfinder lag. Yes, when you're tracking subjects, there is a slight amount of lag that can make it a little bit more difficult to nail that focus sometimes. You do get used to it if you've been shooting all day, the same sort of thing, but sometimes it can just be a little bit laggy. When you start the camera as well for the first time, it takes like about a second and a half to be ready, something that just doesn't happen on my D850 because of course it's optical viewfinder. But if you're just used to pressing that shutter button before you bring it up to your eye, it pretty much negates the problem. That's great. So then, as a roundup, the Z6 with Firmware 3 is a totally capable wildlife camera. Over the last year, it's really changed as where it sits in my bag. Originally, it was just for video. Then it became something that I took out for kind of projects when I was kind of testing the camera and stuff like that. But now it's straight in the bag. Alongside my D850, they're the two cameras that I pick on pretty much all of my professional assignments, and it gives me a boatload of opportunities for shooting. The fact that I can use the camera for video and stills makes it a great hybrid shooter. And if I'm going to pick one camera that I had to have with me the whole time, I would actually pick the Z6 because it just gives me so many more options. Image quality is great, build, camera quality is just excellent. And the fact that now with the firmware updates that have been consistently coming out from Nikon, it has improved to a point where it's excellent and very capable for fulfilling a professional job. And if we see more improvements, it's just going to get better and better and better. So, yeah, if you're looking at one of these for doing some wildlife photography, I certainly think now that with Firmware 3, you'll be more than happy with it. Right, so that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that kind of thoughts and ideas about the Z6 and, found it useful if you're thinking about buying one. If you've got any more questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. But until the next one, guys, stay safe and enjoy your wildlife photography. Right. Catch you soon.